to actually be out there and showing property. So I do have blank copies of the BRBC and the RPA in the back, Alt-Tab, but we are going to jump right in. So if you are on Zoom, you can follow along. So we are jumping in. I'm going to go through it like I would if I was explaining it to the client. And then if you guys have questions on Zoom, Jesse's here. Jesse, the birthday boy, is here. So he will be monitoring the chat and answering or asking any questions if you guys can't unmute yourselves, or just yell it out because we can't see you in here, so just start yelling at us. Okay, so we are jumping in. As we start with all of our contracts, everything must start with an agency disclosure. So it jumps into the fiduciary responsibility that we have with the client. So the first one is as if you are a listing agent. We have blank copies in the back, Chris, if you want to grab two.
Yes, ma'am.
You have an RPA back there and a BRBC.
Oh, nice.
So seller's agent is the first one. The second is your buyer's agent fiduciary duty. So again, this is our buyer, so we'd probably be going over this one. So you'd want to probably read this out loud so they understand the difference of you being a realtor and having a fiduciary duty to them. It sets you apart from everybody else. You have a duty to put their needs in front of yours. You have a duty of utmost care, integrity, honesty, and loyalty. So explain that to them. Show that to them. It's legally binding to them. And then they are going to put their names right here. So we'll call it Bob Buyer and good old Betty Buyer. Betty Buyer. And then you're going to check mark the buyer box on the left. And then where it says agent, I know it says agent, but this is where you're going to put the real estate broker firm, which is Keller Williams Corona, the Keller Williams Corona DRE, and then your name goes on the line, salesperson or broker associate. So your name and your DRE go there. Page 2 is the civil code associated with your fiduciary duty. So this is the civil code backing up what your duty is legally to them. So there's no signature on that page. All right, BRBC, date prepared. We'll put today's date. It's the date that we're preparing it. Doesn't necessarily mean it's the day it's being signed, but it's the day it's being prepared. Automatically, it's put Bob Buyer and Betty Buyer. They are our two buyers. Now, if Bob and Betty were actually a corporation, LLC, or partnership, like legally on paper, not a marriage, but just a legal corporate partnership of some sort, you would actually check the box. But we'll just assume Bob and Betty are a couple and they're married. So we don't need to check the box. The first term is going to be the representation period. So I know the people in the room know this answer. So my Zoomies, what is the longest that you can put for a representation period on the BRBC? I want my... Yes, who answered that?
Bahana.
Good job, Bahana. I can always rely on Bahana to participate. Thank you, Bahana. Woo. All right, good job. 3 months is the max. So even if there's 30 days here, 31 days in another month, it's just going to be 3 months from the day. So today's the 4th, May the 4th. So May, June, July, August. August 4th is the furthest out that we can put it. Now you could make it earlier, but you cannot make it longer than that. If you make it longer than that, it actually voids the entire thing. So we don't want to do that. Now, technically, for type of representation, the contract defaults to non-exclusive right here. So if we do not check this box for exclusive and initial on the page down below in paragraph 15, technically this is not an exclusive agreement, which means our buyers can go out there and be working with other realtors, and we don't like that. We like exclusive relationships here. Now, you're gonna get some buyers potentially that maybe aren't ready to commit to one person. We see that more commonly with like investors. Maybe they have a couple different people that they're working with. Just know that you're probably not gonna be checking the box, and you just wanna make sure that your time and your investment is protected. So just know what you're potentially risking if somebody out there is working with someone else. So we're going to assume Bob and Betty are committed to us. We're committed to them. So we're going to check the box for exclusive. Now, property type, it defaults to single family residence, which also includes condos and manufactured homes. So normally we're not probably going to be messing with this. If for some reason maybe you're working with someone who's only looking for multifamily and they're like, I don't want to work with you for single family residence, I don't know why someone would do that, but in theory you could actually exclude single family residence. However, if they are also maybe looking for vacant land, multifamily, you know you're going to be looking at a bunch of different types of things, just make sure you check everything that could potentially apply to them. Location, I like to keep it as general as possible because I don't want to accidentally limit my, coverage on covering somebody. So I would probably check county and then do Riverside and Orange counties. Let's just say they're kind of looking around Corona and Orange County. So any counties that maybe I know they're looking, San Bernardino, Riverside, Orange County, I'm going to just include here. Even if they've said I'm only looking in Corona, it doesn't hurt just to put a couple. And if for some reason maybe they're like, I only want one city, again, you could put it to one city, but you don't have to if you then put the county instead. Okay. Buyer preferences and priorities. If you wanted, there is actually a CAR form where you can spell out what the buyer is actually looking for, what their preference list is. It's not a requirement. You don't have to include it. I usually don't because normally maybe I've already had a buyer's consult with them. I've already written it down. We've already had that conversation. I don't necessarily need to then reiterate it onto a CAR form because things change anyway. And because it's not required, I usually don't even mess with Section C. Section D, any properties excluded from representation. So maybe they have an exclusive agreement signed with somebody else for a couple other properties, or maybe they have a non-exclusive that's got a couple properties that are covered by someone else. You would just want to differentiate that here so it's clear what you're representing them on and what somebody else might be representing them on. So we just want to be as clear as possible. Any questions on that?
Amen.
All right. Broker compensation notice. The amount or rate of real estate commissions is not fixed by law. They are set by each broker individually and may be negotiable between buyer and broker. Just again, commissions are 100% negotiable. We just reiterate that. So we're going to put the amount of compensation here. So this is where I would explain to the buyer that my professional fee is 3%. That's what I charge. Yes, we have a question.
Question on Zoom. It says, what do you typically say when you present the BRBC to the client so it doesn't scare them off? And with the market we are in now, when do you usually send this to them? First meeting before showing them homes? Question mark?
Yes, so typically you're meeting with them before you're showing them homes, hopefully. Hopefully you're not showing up for the first time at the front door because legally, by law, you have to have this signed before you walk in the door with somebody. It is law. Yes.
What if you show properties without it?
You're breaking the law. Yep, you could actually get your license taken away. I don't want to take that risk. This is my livelihood. If somebody wanted to turn you in for it, they could. And you could get into all that, but I don't think you even necessarily need to. And I like the way that Coach phrased it this morning. He said, before you and I go and actually look at properties, I just need you to acknowledge something. So take some of the pressure off the word contract, like he mentioned. I just need to send you an acknowledgement of what my role is to you and your commitment to me. So just like when you meet with an attorney or go to a doctor, there's things that you guys set, there's expectations that you set so you know exactly what you're getting and what I'm providing to you, which is a big reason why the fiduciary duty is mentioned first. But the way that I would explain it is somewhere like that. So usually you're meeting with them at the buyer consultation, and at the buyer consultation is where I would get this signed. And then when we get to the part of compensation, I'm going to say my professional fee is 3% and leave it at that. And most people are going to say, okay, great. Nobody is usually commenting back. Now, if they say, well, who pays that? Because some do. Some understand kind of how it works because maybe they've bought and sold before. But some are like, okay, so what does that mean? Do I have to pay you 3%? What does that mean? So then when we get to that point is when I would say, so more than likely we are going to be able to negotiate with the listing side, with the sellers, that my compensation is to be paid from the seller. More than likely. That's typically how we do it. And just like every other term in the offer, we're gonna put all the offer together as a complete package, and one of the terms that we include is what the professional fee is for the buyer's agent. Now, if for some reason a seller comes back and says, nope, I'm not willing to pay 3%, I'm not willing to pay anything at all. Okay, so are you willing to have every other buyer who can't afford to pay 3% not write an offer then? Because how many buyers do you know, and I'm saying this to you guys, I wouldn't say it like this to them, but how many buyers do you know that could pay 3% out of pocket for their agent? None. So how many buyers are going to be writing offers on that property?
Not many.
None. So it would behoove the seller to work something out so they have more offers to consider. Or they can just let their house keep sitting on the market. That's fine too. We'll move on to something else. Yes.
A couple more questions.
Yes.
Can they be in a BRBC with another agent at the same time?
Yes, if it's non-exclusive. If it's exclusive, no. And technically it would default to who did they sign with first, if there's no cancellation. We had more on here, you had one, you had your hand up at one point.
Yeah.
Yes, what else do we have on Zoom?
Another says, what about open houses if you're hosting for a seller listing?
You do not need to have a BRBC sign for people coming in. That triggers a different form that needs to be visible, and you have to make what they called a concerted effort to get people to sign. And that form is the OHNA, we call it the OHANA. The OHNA form needs to be somewhere out there, and you need to have made a concerted effort to have people to sign in somewhere. That's technically the rule.
So like if you have a book, they can sign in that.
Yes, and I do that. I usually don't have my sign in be the actual OHNA, but you have to have the OHNA out somewhere. It needs to be visible.
Okay.
Yes, but usually I have people sign in on my sign in form. Yeah.
It has to be visible as in like the Ohana, or
Yes.
and as long as you have like a sign-in sheet there.
The Ohana has to be visible as well. Yes. Yes. Any more questions on Zoom?
A comment from Kelly, but you can also use the dating form, a form for just a couple of homes.
Yes. You can use if somebody is maybe a little hesitant to acknowledge. There is the other form that is non-exclusive, which is the PSRA, the Property Showing Representation Agreement, I think is what that stands for. We call it the dating form. This is the married form that we're going after. The dating form is the other one, which is up to 5 properties. So then maybe if you want to date for 5 properties, maybe after 5 dates, we've made the decision if we're ready to commit to a relationship. Okay, you had a question, Efren, and then we'll do Mara and Coach.
Would you ever want to push this?
I would always start with this.
The PR?
No,
The
I would
BRBC.
always start with this.
Yeah, like.
Because they don't know the difference. If we know it because we're in it every day.
Right.
To them, they don't know the difference. So if you start with that, they're gonna go off of what you recommend.
Right.
Whereas if you recommended this, they may have been completely fine with this.
Right.
Now, if there's pushback and we're doing a lot of back and forth, is when we can start having a conversation about the PSRA. I have never used a PSRA. I've always
never
gone
used
straight to this. Yeah. I've never had any issues with this.
Why would anybody have a, what's it called, dual broker? BRBC?
We see it a lot with investors. Investors sometimes most investors are not married to one person.
Yep.
They have a couple different agents that they work with. Because they're looking for opportunities. You might have different off-market opportunities than Mara has, than Coach has, and Chris has. So they usually have a few agents in their back pocket for
Different counties.
off-market opportunities. Yeah. Yeah. Mara, you had a question?
Yeah, so for example, if I have the PSRA,
Yes.
I still have to do the BRBC, or if
Technically,
I have
no.
to go to the RPA?
Technically, the PSRA is sufficient.
Yes.
To go to RPA. Yeah,
Never mind, that was it.
that was the question.
Now, what if we have the PR form and we write an offer and it goes into escrow and
That's
escrow
fine.
says, I need your BRBC.
I mean, it might just be a formality at that point, but the
But at that
PSRA,
point, they just.
yeah, at that point, you're
They're
adding it in as another
Okay.
document with the
Okay.
disclosures. Not all escrows probably would,
They
most
did.
would probably, oh, they did,
Yeah.
okay, yeah,
But that's okay.
it's
At
just a
that point.
formality at that point.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, are we good on Zoom?
Good.
So the reason I put 3% here is because whatever you put here is now the max. So if you put 2% here, and then you later find out that the seller is willing to offer 3%, well, you've just capped yourself at 2. You actually cannot go above what is here. So I always put 3.
Yeah.
Because I'm gonna go in assuming I'm getting my 3. Put 6 for all I care. I don't care. Now, if you are getting 2 from the seller and you have 3 on here, if you change nothing, escrow is going to assume that your buyer is paying the 1% difference and charge your buyer automatically. If your buyer is unable and 2% is all we can scrape together, which is fine, I certainly wouldn't lose a deal or a client over only getting 2% if that was all I could get, that's for sure. But if that's the case, then you need to make sure you do a modification of terms, getting rid of the fact that the buyer is covering the 1%. So it would be an MTBR. Yes, Chris?
2 questions.
Yes.
Does that also include, like, if you were to put, it says 3% of the acquisition price, and if any $sign, does the $sign amount also mean that's your cap?
No,
It's
so
one or the
that
other.
would be an additional amount even on top of that. So let's just say that I was getting 3% and $1,000
Bonus, yeah.
It would be that and that is now your professional fee. So I typically don't fill this out.
Okay. And then if you
I
wanted,
keep it at that.
let's say you did do 2% and that was the max, but later on they're like, okay, we're willing to pay like 2.5. Is that something that you can also just go in and change, or
You would do
is
a
it-
modification, an MTBR for that, and say buyer only to pay 0.5%. Yes.
But you could only go down, not up, right?
That's what that was my
No, correct. An MTBR can go down, because this is, again, but you can't say buyer is gonna pay me an extra 1%. Nope, they're not. That's the
Can you do an
max.
addendum on that to make it higher, or is that like,
Probably, but probably.
but might as well just stay at 3 and then whatever?
Yeah, I mean, I know the spirit of this contract, that's not the intended purpose. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, any more questions on that? Nothing on Zoom? Okay. Now, payments received by broker from seller or others. If broker receives, this is where it kind of goes up and explains the difference here. If broker receives compensation from seller or others for broker's representation of buyer, the amount shall be credited against the buyer's obligation to pay the broker. That's where it's saying if the seller is willing to pay 2%, it will be credited against this obligation here. Broker shall not receive any amount in excess of the amount specified here. Yeah. Okay, continuation period, 4C, continued right to payment for broker involved properties. So this is where you would establish there is a continuation period where if after this agreement expires or is canceled, if a buyer changes their mind and says, you know what, I actually do want to buy that house that Chris showed me last week, it actually protects you that you would still be eligible for the compensation here. And so you want to sometimes put, like, I'll usually do 60 days or 90 days here, just in case, because things change. People say, I'm not looking anymore, and then all of a sudden a week later, they're like, I found this great house on Zillow. So things change all the time. Now, this is a newer addition as of this year, this checkbox down here. Broker is paying a referral fee related to the representation of a buyer. If that buyer that you got was referred to you and you're sending a referral fee to an agent, you need to check the box because your buyer needs to know that now. That never used to be the case. They just would have no involvement in the referral. Now they just need to be aware of it. Everything just has to be disclosed. So you would check the box right here and it will add a RAD form. Yes.
Question is, do you walk through each section with the buyer and explain
Yes,
it
just
to
like
them?
this.
Oh, okay.
Yep. And walking through each section here, we talked about this at a breakthrough. Everything is front loaded in the offer now, or the contract. So everything that has clauses and paragraphs, the paragraphs are to the left. Anything that's fillable, they put at the front few pages. Whereas before it used to be, all right, let's go to page 20 where section 5 is. Let's go to page 10 where 4G is. And you'd miss things and you'd be like, oh shoot, I didn't check the box on page 13. Now everything's right here at the front. So that's why we really only stick to kind of going through the front loaded pages, because we're already speaking to the paragraph that it equates to later in the attachment. So yes, I go through just like this with them. Yes. Cancellation. So depending on if this is an exclusive versus non-exclusive contract, the cancellation is different. If this is non-exclusive, if we did not check the box up above, upon receipt in writing, by the way, text, email, something, in writing of the buyer informing us that they would like to cancel the agreement, it's effective immediately. Upon receipt. Exclusive is effective 30 days after receipt. So if Ulysses says to me, I'd like to cancel the agreement today on May 4th, 30 days from now is when that's effective. Yes, Chris?
Whenever something says like cancellation effective upon receipt, does receipt usually mean written?
Yes.
I
I
sent
need
you an email.
proof. I need proof of receipt. We need the receipts, you know, people say that. We need the receipts. We need it on this one. I need it in writing. Yes.
Would a buyer think indifferently if they knew there was a referral fee?
Usually not. I've never experienced that. A lot of times, in fact, I would say it builds trust, because if they were referred to you by somebody that they know, they obviously have a level of trust for that person. So there's a comfort there in knowing that you somehow were connected to that person that, you know, gave them that recommendation, and vice versa too. It's nice to know that there's that warm handoff. So I would think it gives a little bit of a warmer lead. Okay, buyer financial and personal information. Time to deliver buyer personal financial information. Technically, what this is saying is that within 5 calendar days from executing this agreement, the buyer is going to show some sort of proof of funds or pre-approval letter showing that they are actually capable of being a buyer and being represented technically. Now, am I like counting down the calendar days if for some reason we're taking a little longer on the pre-approval? No, I'm not like, okay, you're 1 day left and then this whole thing blows up. No. Because I'm not ever gonna be pushy like that with the buyer. There might be reasons that things are taking a little bit longer. Maybe they're filing their taxes and they can't give me their tax returns yet because they're working with the CPA on it. There could be very good reasons as to why we don't have everything totally sorted out yet. So I'm going to be nimble and flexible in that regard. Now, if the buyer in 9B2, right here, if the buyer has laid it all out in the beginning and says, I do not have any money to contribute towards your compensation in any world, which is absolutely very possible with a lot of buyers.
Yep.
Because you got to remember, buyers have to do their down payment. They got to do the closing costs. They got to pay the lender fees. So more than likely, they're not going to have an extra, you know, stack of cash on the side for us too. So if you know that going in, you better check this box. Buyer does not have sufficient funds to pay broker, which is basically your way of kind of letting the listing agent know too, hey, we can't. It's not that we don't want to cover anything. We feasibly cannot cover any funds towards the broker compensation for the buyer agency. Now, do not check this box just to be like, oh, well, this is just my way of making sure that my buyer doesn't pay any compensation. Because if your buyer suddenly shows that they got 250 grand in the bank and you check the box, that's not gonna come off super well. to the listing agent.
How do you work around? Do you have to pull out a certain amount of money for them just to show?
No, don't lie. Don't check the box. Don't check the box. If they've got the money, don't check the box. It doesn't mean that you're not going to be able to negotiate later. You're still going to have your negotiation, skills to be able to get what you deserve, A, and B, make sure that the seller compensates you. But that's going to be on you to negotiate now. But don't lie.
But what if I don't know yet?
Then don't check it. Don't check it.
Don't check it.
If you don't know, don't check it.
Cause that's something we can later on make an addendum for.
You can. Yeah. You can. It would be weirder to make an addendum to uncheck that. Just kidding, my buyer does have money. Yeah, I wouldn't want to do that. But you could very much say 9B2 does apply. Yes.
What if later it's evident they can pay broker fees?
Then do not check the box. I'm not saying have your buyer be the one to pay you. I'm saying don't check the box if they can. Okay. Yes.
For the time to deliver buyer personal financial information,
Yes.
do you usually keep that a little more wider than 5 days?
I usually don't even mess with it, and I'm not about enforcing it either. Yeah. And that's it for the BRBC. And the reason why we're blowing through so fast is because we also have to get to the RPA, and we now have 30 minutes, guys. So, any more questions on the BRBC? Oh, one more thing. I do not want to forget this. Okay, so we just went through page 1 of 5 on the BRBC. Remember, if you check the box for exclusive on this page right here, 5 of 5, they have to initial right here. If you forget, it's not exclusive. Okay.
When you send a DocuSign, is that like an optional?
Yes.
as well? So we have to make sure that it's.
Yes, good question. What the point was that was made here was if you just send it like automatically doing AuthentiSign or DocuSign, it actually defaults that this is an optional initial. So if you check the box for exclusive, make that not optional. Make it required. Good point, Mara. Okay. Good to go on that. Yes.
One more question. What if seller doesn't want to pay buyer broker commission?
So if the seller does not want to pay buyer broker commission, are they prepared to now forego every buyer that now cannot pay the buyer broker commission? In a market where coming by a buyer is not so easy? That would be my response to that, agent. So, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, you've been sitting on the market for 100 days. Are you prepared to sit for another 100 days and wait to see if a buyer who's willing to pay that commission will come? I wouldn't be willing to take that risk.
Have you seen that happen?
Usually when you start getting into conversations like that, they're willing to play ball.
Yeah.
When a seller has been on the market for 100 days and they get a buyer finally, usually they're not putting their stance down of, I'm not gonna pay commission, because at the end of the day, don't you wanna net something? Sure, you can pay my 2.5% of 700,000, or you can get 100% of nothing. Because 100% of nothing is still nothing. So usually they're willing to work with you. When there's, when it's multiple offers and we're in a crazy market, yeah, we might start, battling a little more and you see commissions go down a little bit. I have never seen a seller say I won't pay anything. Because they're probably not going to be selling.
Do they usually come with understanding that they
Yes,
are going to pay?
that's what I coach my sellers on. More than likely, we're going to be the ones responsible for also paying for the buyer's agent's compensation. Generally, they're anywhere from 2 to 3%. I coach my sellers on that. So when I run a net sheet, I'm showing my compensation, and I'm also showing it with the buyer's agent compensation that they're going to also be paying out. Now, you might get lucky, and might get a buyer that says, you only need to pay me 1%. Or pay my agent 1%. Great, we're gonna net even more than what we thought. But never have I ever had a seller not willing to pay compensation.
And now that makes the offer
Because
more-
it doesn't make sense for them.
the offer makes it more competitive if the buyer does wanna pay some of the compensation. Correct?
Mm-hmm, it does.
So it'd be something.
But if you've got one offer
Yeah.
and they're asking for compensation, pay the
Pay it.
compensation.
Pay it.
Because that's your one offer. All right. Good questions, guys.